Alright, so October is finally here, and while I'm super excited to dive into like scary games, spooky games, or outright terrifying games, first I wanted to go over some of the games that I picked up in September, and normally I try to do this like right at the end of the month, but because I was a little bit delayed last month, it's just gonna have to eat up this first Tuesday here in October, but no worries, I've still got a lot of spooky stuff coming up on the channel that is specifically related to, again, just scary stuff, or maybe lighter fare that we'll get into on Thursday, but for now, let's just go ahead and take a look at some of the games I grabbed in September, and as always, I would love to hear what games you got as well, but for starters, the game that I picked up I was most excited about, but sadly did not pan out quite as well as I wanted it to, was Steel Rising. So much like last month's Thymesia, Steel Rising is yet another Souls-like game that dropped, and I bought it specifically because it's another Souls-like game. After enjoying Thymesia last month, I sort of figured I'd be in for more of the same, a game that would probably land as a 7 or maybe an 8 considering it's clearly displaying some FromSoft DNA here. Plus it has a really interesting premise. Now this is set in an alternate history version of the French Revolution where you'll be playing as Aegis, an automaton bodyguard to Queen Marie Antoinette. However, you're not the only robot in town, and in turn you'll be tasked with ending the massacres that are being perpetrated by King Louis's army of robots. Now I have to admit that whole setup sounds amazing, and pretty much right from Jump Street, like right as soon as I got done with character creation, I was very excited to check out this Souls-like experience that has a distinctly Steam, or I guess maybe Diesel Punk coat of paint. However, while Steel Rising might be a 7 or 8 generally speaking, I definitely would not put it that high up there for the Steam Deck specifically. Don't get me wrong, the game is technically playable, but it's really rough, and honestly in a few spots it seemed like it was struggling to even hit 30 FPS, even though most of the time it seemed okay, and even when I dropped all the settings as low as they could go, that was pretty much the best that I could get out of it. Now to be fair, I didn't do any advanced experimentation like changing Proton or looking for any patches or really looking for any in-depth guides to really squeeze the most out of it, but usually whenever I have a game that, is hovering around 30 FPS, I can just kind of drop a few of the settings and really get the experience to where I want it to be, but that was not the case for me with Steel Rising. And that's a shame because it does seem to have a lot of promise with some fresh ideas on the Souls-like genre. For instance, while combat is still kind of a tug of war between aggression and evasion where you want to make sure that you don't exhaust all of your stamina, doing so as an automaton means that you actually malfunction temporarily, which I thought was a really nice touch. Sure, it's technically the same thing as if you were an organic hero getting exhausted, but it feels cooler knowing that you're performing all of this as a 1780s era robot. I also like Steel Rising's streamlined approach to character building and how augments and upgrades just feel more thematically appropriate. It's not that I don't love the deeper waters of something like Elden Ring, I'm just saying that I really appreciated the larger focus on combat for Steel Rising and a less cryptic approach to storytelling. Again, it's just a shame that at least at present, it doesn't seem like it's a very good fit for the Steam Deck. Ultimately, I still think there's something good in Steel Rising, but I'm probably going to have to find it on the PS5. And to kind of feed off Steel Rising, the next game on this list was another fresh coat of paint on the Souls-like formula, although one that is not that new because this game technically came out in 2017, but I want to see how it was on the Steam Deck, and that is Code Vein. And even though I've already played this on the PS4, it was on sale last month for something like $7, and I figured it would be a fun title to sort of hold me over until Steel Rising came out. Plus, with Halloween on the way, and considering you play as an anime vampire, although technically I think they're called revenants in this game, seemed like as good a time as any to jump back in. After going through character creation in the opening tutorial, it's immediately clear that this is a Souls-like that is much closer to a FromSoft game, because it definitely has a lot to keep track of and manage between your raw stats and your blood code, which is sort of like a class system where you might choose to be a fighter or a caster, for example. So ultimately there's a lot of flexibility in how you approach your build and get your stupidly hot vampire into the throes of battle. And I say that because the game is strikingly good looking. I think a lot of people might find the anime aesthetic a little off-putting, but personally I found that to be a really nice change of pace from the more realistic-looking Souls-like games that I've played in the past. Plus it seemed to play really well on the deck, keeping near 60 FPS by default, and I'm guessing with a few tweaks you could probably get it there consistently, though instead I opted to tone down some of the environmental effects like motion blur and just cap everything at 50, which worked great. And speaking of otherworldly creatures, the next game that I picked up is spooky, but not necessarily scary, and it certainly has less to keep track of, at least from a control perspective, and that is Demon's Tilt. I'd had my eye on Demon's Tilt for a while just because the idea of an occult-based pinball machine just seemed like a whole lot of fun. Plus it satisfied some nostalgia that I have for the creepy pinball machines that I used to play when I was a kid at my local bowling alley. Specifically, I believe I remember playing an Elvira-themed pinball machine when I was growing up. But here's the thing, I'm hardly a pinball aficionado. I just find the simplicity of the game appealing as a nice palate cleanser between more complicated games. Well, complicated mechanically, because make no mistake, Demon's Tilt is definitely complicated as there are just so many things that you can trigger on its massive board between the 3 different sections that you'll be playing on. I'd be tempted to say it's intimidating, but honestly I don't play games like this because I need to get a high score. It's usually just because I need a break from getting wrecked in some other game. So if you're just looking for some pretty lights and sounds to take in for a more relaxed experience, it's great for that, and it has a spooky coat of paint to boot. Of course, if you want to try to dig deeper into its modes and subtables, then you'll have to learn a little bit more about which actions trigger those events. To the developers' credit, they did include a quick guide, but it's pretty sparse, and I honestly have no idea how to rack up the highest score or anything. All I know is that the music is great, and the camera does an excellent job of following your ball around the table. Although I will say that sometimes there's so much going on with the various effects on the table that it's easy to get sort of mesmerized and lose track of the ball visually. But still, if you're looking for some arcadey fun, it might be worth a look, and considering it's a game that's not overly taxing, it predictably runs super smooth on the deck. And speaking of arcade classics, the next one that I bought is technically one that I think I bought on August 30th, but honestly the nostalgia was so strong for me I really didn't want to leave it off this list, and I didn't really get a chance to include it in August's list, but that would be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Cowabunga Collection. This game is definitely one of the best collection titles that I've ever seen. It pretty much collects every early TMNT game from my youth across the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Genesis, and arcade. I love this because even though I played a lot of these games, I definitely missed out on a few of the originals like Hyperstone Heist and the Manhattan Project. Now, not every Turtles game back then was an absolute banger or anything, and some of them were ridiculously difficult. But a lot more of them were absolute classics that you could enjoy with friends, and that's really what drew it to me most, aside from just the overwhelming nostalgia. Because jumping back into the Turtles arcade machine is as fun now as it was when I was 8 years old, and I just begged my parents at every opportunity to take me to Pizza Hut, because that's where the arcade machine happened to be in my town. Honestly, Pizza Hut wasn't even my favorite pizza back then when I was a kid, it was Giovanni's. I was just willing to forgo better pizza in the interest of trying to take another run at Shredder. But okay, let's get back to the collection. Now, performance on the deck is excellent, which really shouldn't be that surprising, but what is surprising is all of the niceties that they threw in to make this collection really stand out. Konami doesn't exactly carry a bunch of goodwill from gamers these days, but I love what they did here. You can look at not just old advertisements for the various Turtle games, but also some fascinating looks at early marketing communications and style guides for the Turtles designs. Or you could revisit all of the comic book covers, and they even threw in music from all of the games as well. Plus, from a functionality standpoint, it also has some thoughtful features that really punch up the best of TMNT games and sort of curb the difficulty of the less forgiving titles through save states and rewind functionality. Which means you can finally jump into the dam level and defuse all of those bombs with confidence. Now, if you grew up on Turtles, it's a no-brainer, but if you're a younger player who just wanted to see what the earliest days of Turtle Mania were all about, it's still a pretty good package. And I'm pretty sure if you told 8-year-old me that one day I'd have all of the Turtle games playing flawlessly in the palm of my hand, it would have absolutely blown my mind. And speaking of green, unorthodox protagonists, this next game was actually originally released, I believe, in 2005 on the original Xbox, and I always wanted to play it, and I never got around to it, and I saw that it went on sale for the remaster of this game, and that is Stubbs the Zombie. So in this 2021 update, you'll take control of the titular Stubbs, a zombie who has risen in the retro future city of Punch Bowl. The whole thing is pretty hilarious, and it's styled after like those futuristic views of the 50s that you would see in like old slideshow videos. Now, I've only played this a little bit, but I can already see why this game had such a cult following. It's just a pure, simple third-person action game with fun humor and one of the most interesting zombie portrayals I've seen in a game. Normally these guys are just fodder to blast through, but Rebel Without a Pulse really humanizes the zombie archetype in like this ironic reverse twist sort of way. Despite not saying that much, Stubbs' body language is hilarious, and he's just endearingly charming as he bumbles around eating brains, driving vehicles, wrecking cops, and just commanding an ever-expanding zombie army. And even though I've only been able to play it a little bit so far, it seems to run rock solid on the deck, and I think this will be one of the first games that I really kick off October with, because it's fun, weird, and really just seems like a nice way to ease into more terrifying fare as we get closer to Halloween. Alright, and that's it for this one. Again, this is not every game that I picked up in September, just some of the highlights that I was most excited to sort of play myself, or, you know, just highlight for the Steam Deck, because I figured other people might appreciate them as well. I did pick up some other bonus games like Abzu, and I grabbed Terminator Resistance, which I've always heard good things about, even though I don't think it did that well critically. My buddy GamerThumbTV vouches for it, so I figure I'll have to check it out at some point more thoroughly. But hey, what about you? Did you grab anything super rad in September? If so, please let me know in the comments, because, you know, I'm always open to suggestions as well. As always, thanks for taking the time out of your day to watch videos on this channel. I really appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next time.